A few updates ago, we added the ability to create presets for software tools, and presets allow you to apply specific settings to a tool and then save it so that you can access it later and automatically either convert something to that stitch type with those settings or create it from scratch and have it apply those settings as it generates the stitches. And so just to show you what that's like is I have a piece of artwork here. If I come down to a steel stitch and I left click on the convert to, it'll automatically convert that to a steel stitch. And the properties, what it applies to that steel stitch is the default settings for the software. So default settings fall under each of these tabs here. And so what we added was the ability to change these things and then save it as a preset so you could have it automatically apply that. So if I come back down here and instead of left clicking on this, I right mouse click, I can access some presets that I've already created, or I can save a preset when I have one selected here with some changes. So if I click on this 4.0 width, it will convert that to that new style of a steel stitch, and you can see in the properties box that those settings have changed. So you can create a steel stitch, change any of the settings you want, and then come down and save it as a preset. And you can do that for all these tools down here at the bottom, and you can also do that for your digitizing tools. So in this update, what we've added was the ability to apply presets to the artwork tool and also to text, which is very cool. So a lot of people have certain fonts that they like to use and certain settings for fonts, and so this allows you to create some presets for that to easily access it. But before we get into that, I want to point out that the artwork tool has changed a little bit. This is the artwork tool, the new icon for it. Before, you just selected one of these line types and then you would create it. But in order to do the presets, we had to create its own icon. Once you select the artwork tool, then you can come in and choose what line type you want to use. And so when it's not selected, you'll see that it's grayed out. But when you select it, now it becomes available. By default, the line input style is utilized, and that is the most common. So to show you how this works, you would create, let's see here, let me go into this one. You would create a line, and it could be any line, and select it, and you come over to the properties box and say, you know, I usually like to have a 3mm wide line, so I could come in there and choose that and hit apply, and you can see that that makes a thicker line. So if I select this and I come up to the artwork tool and I right mouse click on it, I can go to save preset, and this will allow me to save that as a preset of 3mm. This is what I'll use for the name, and I'll hit OK, and it says that it's created successfully. So if I come back to this one and I change it back to 0 and hit apply, you can see that that's what it looks like. But if I want to create a line with that automatically applied to it, I just come up to the artwork tool, right mouse click, and choose the 3M. And now as I create a line, it will automatically generate with that 3mm wide outline. So that is the line tool, the artwork tool, and how you can utilize presets with it. And now let's talk a little bit about text. So whenever you add text to your screen, you'll see that it says my text, and it always brings up the last font that you used. In this case, I used Breezy the last time, and then the settings for the fonts are all default. So the height, spacing, the width, even in the text extra, it's a sew sequence of left to right. Trim is set to always trim between letters, and it will lock stitch between letters. So there's a few things that you can that are adjustable, but by default it's going to load these settings. But now with the presets for fonts, you can have the font selected, and you can choose maybe a font that you really like to use a lot, and maybe I use this font digital a lot. I can bring that up, and let's say I like to be at 15 millimeters in height, and I can adjust any of these spacings. But let's say that I use this a lot for hats. Okay, so I would change the sew sequence from going left to right to go from the center out, because that's how you want to work with hats when you're doing embroidery for them. So I'll come in here to the sew sequence and choose center. Next I'll go to the trim type, and I like to have it automatically create trims when needed. If it doesn't need to have a trim, I don't like to do it. And because I'm doing it as an auto trim, I'm going to come down here and say only do a lock stitch around a trim, and then I'm going to hit apply. But let's say that I can come into underlay here and say, you know, I only use a center line with that, so I'm going to choose that option. I could do more settings like with push and pull, compensation, whatever I wanted to change. And so once I have it set how I want it and I have it selected, I'll just come into the text tool, I'll right mouse click and choose save preset. And when I do this, I'm going to name it digital, that's the name of the font, and hat, because I like to use this one on hats, and I set it up for that, and I'll choose OK, and it says the preset has been saved. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change this font and get out of that setting, just to show you that if I come in here now and I right mouse click and I choose digital hat and then click on the screen, you'll notice that it brought this text up, and it brought it in at the 15 millimeter for the height. It loaded it with the sew sequence of center, trim at auto, and a lock stitch around a trim, and the underlay at center. So it remembered all the settings that I wanted to have for that text. And this is just a really nice tool to have to work with text. I've used it a number of times already because there are specific fonts that I like to use, and there are settings that I like to use for those fonts, especially when it comes to the lock stitches and trims. So it's a very helpful feature, and I hope that you get a lot of use out of this feature.